Hi friends, it's Walter Zimrock from the Love from Lizi design team, here with a video featuring another 3 cards with the fabulous March Bugs and Kisses card making kit. I hope you enjoy them. For this card, we're going to use an A2 white card base. I have an A2 green cardstock panel. I have a 5.25 by 4 inch of the like fuchsia pink cardstock. I then have a 5 inch by 3.75 inch piece of this beautiful printed cardstock. I chose a piece of ephemera to coordinate with it. And we're going to be using a piece of this green foil cardstock as well. I start by adhering the green card panel to the card base using double-sided tape. And then, once that's done, I take the pink card panel and adhere that down using double-sided tape. I cut the green foil cardstock down to 5 inches by 3.75 inches. And then I cut the patterned paper into two 2-inch strips that I adhere onto the foiled paper using some double-sided adhesive. I then adhere that completed panel on top of the pink cardstock using double-sided tape. I take a piece of double-sided foam tape and center it onto the green foiled cardstock strip. And then adhere the piece of ephemera on top of it. I'm now ready to stamp my sentiment, so I put my card onto my stamping platform, take my stamp, secure the card in place using magnets, grab some black ink, and stamp the sentiment. I ended up stamping it 3 times in total to make sure that I had a nice dark stamp. The final step was to take some of the large gems from the kit, 3 in total, and adhere them down to the card. And voila, it's finished. For this card, we're going to use a light blue A2 card base, a piece of the beautiful blue foiled cardstock that is cut to 5.25 inches by 4 inches, a piece of the patterned paper that's cut to 5.25 by 4 inches. You can see how pretty the print is with the little lanterns and bugs on it. We're going to use 2 pieces of ephemera, this lantern one, as well as a dragonfly. And we're going to use this ephemera sentiment. I'm using the blue foil paper and a nesting rectangle die to create a frame. I get my die in place and I use some low-tack tape to hold it there. I'm then going to run it through my die cut machine to cut that center out, and I'll have my frame. Be sure to save that extra piece from the center because it's going to be perfect for another project. I adhere some double-sided foam tape strips onto the back of the frame. And once I have the tape on all sides, I press it down onto the patterned cardstock to create the framed panel. The framed panel is then adhered down to the card base with some double-sided tape. And I love the look of the frame being centered within the card panel. I then put some double-sided tape onto the lantern ephemera and place it onto the card panel. And once I'm happy with the placement of that, I use some double-sided foam tape to adhere the dragonfly onto the card. The sentiment strip already has some double-sided foam tape on the back of it, so I peel it off and place the sentiment onto the card. I then take 3 of the gems from the kit and place them onto the card as an embellishment. The final step is to take some of the beautiful metallic green peel-offs and put them down around the center of each side of the frame. I think this is going to add a really nice look to further coordinate the blues and the greens coming from the patterned paper and the frame. So I go with one of the medium-sized strips and adhere it down the middle of one side of the frame, get it in place, snip the end off, and then go ahead and do the same to each of the other sides. And our beautiful card is done. And finally, for our third card, we are going to be using some pieces of the ephemera. We have this beautiful jar with the dragonfly and the flowers and the leaves. Additional flowers and leaves. We're going to use this piece of the, if you want to call it twill or mesh. We're going to use that. I already did some of the prep work on the cardstock, but we're going to use the second 5x7 card base. I have a piece of the magenta foil paper that is cut down to be slightly less than a 5x7, so that is at 6.75 by 4.75. I then have a beautiful piece of printed paper that's going to coordinate so nicely with that foil paper, and that is cut down to be even smaller. And I have it lined up, and I checked it with the card to make sure that I'm going to be cutting and getting everything in the right place, because these are going to live on top of that. So, since I've already done this and I have everything secured, I'm going to put that through my die cut machine. I measure and cut the size of the piece of mesh that I'll need to cover the window. I secure the piece of mesh down onto the back of the magenta card panel using double-sided tape, and then add additional double-sided tape to get the panel adhered down onto the card base. But before adhering it down, I notice how much space there is around the circle so that I can add an additional touch. That additional touch is using a metallic green gel pen to color around the circle so that instead of seeing the white coming through, you'll actually see green, which I think is a nice touch. With the coloring around the circle done, I adhere down the magenta card panel and then adhere down the printed card panel on top of it. I'm going to place the jar and dragonfly ephemera on the inside of the card so that you see it through the mesh. So I align where I like it, grab a pencil, and make a little mark so I know where I want to place it. I then take some craft glue, put it onto the back of the ephemera, and adhere it into place. I can now start to add the ephemera onto the front of the card. I start by laying out my leaves and gluing them down, making sure that I'm happy with where they're placed. And what I want to do is build this little patch of flowers down under the window so I get additional elements in place. And then I can start to add the flowers in. And to add the flowers in, I use some double-sided foam tape so that they have a little depth to them. I then stamp my sentiment onto a scrap piece of white cardstock and use a green glitter gel pen to add some additional little sparkle into the sentiment. Using gel pens like this is a great way to add a small detail that can really lift your design. My paper trimmer has interchangeable blades that allow for different types of cuts. So I thought it would be a fun detail to use the decal edge blade to cut out my sentiment. So I put that blade in and I trim around each side of the sentiment to give it that deckled edge. I could have done this with the straight edge, but I just thought that adding a little bit of additional detail would be a fun touch. I go ahead and glue the sentiment onto a piece of the magenta foil cardstock, cut it to size, and then do the same thing using the decal blade to add that extra design touch to the sentiment strip. I add some glue onto the back of the sentiment and glue it into place. I add some gems from the kit for some additional sparkle and detail. And the card is finished. It's so pretty with the color combinations and the little extra details that I put in.